We have a release date. Hello, welcome to the Eternal Spoiler Breakdown. My name is Pojo, and Flame of Zolta is coming out on Monday. But not only that, Eternal and all of the expansions are launching on Switch on Tuesday. So you'll be able to play it on your mobile devices, or rather your semi-mobile devices, your mobile consoles. Basically, you'll be able to play it on Switch, and it should be available on Tuesday, which is going to be pretty sweet. But Flame of Zolta is also coming out, so we're going to be going through a pile of spoilers and interesting stuff going on. So first things first, a couple of things to get out of the way. The Switch launch is happening. There's going to be like a weird welcome pack type thing where you can buy like $30 worth of gems to be used on the Switch. Because of the way that the Switch apparently manages like monetization, the gems can only be spent on Switch, so that's notable if you're going to be picking it up. It does come with an exclusive card back, which has like Switch buttons on it. It's very cute. It's quite well designed. It's pretty neat. But yeah, that's happening. And then also we are seeing the release of the Flame of Zolta. In addition, the Flame of Zolta is going to be coming with a couple of interesting things. So like we are actually seeing some changes to Expedition, where it's becoming the competitive mode in a bit more of a sense. It's going to get its own league, starting just online at first, but by the end of the month it should be live in the client as its own ranked league, which honestly, that's the thing that I am really looking forward to. I don't know for sure if it's going to have like a serious MMR yet or not, but I'm really hoping so, because yeah, I'm very much looking forward to playing Expeditions on a competitive front, and I think that should be the primary mode for Eternal going forward, just because like ranked is getting a little bit stale with the amount of like just large good stuff piles that we are seeing. So yeah, Flame of Zolta is coming out, and it's going to be something that we can play like pretty awesomely with a bunch of other stuff. They're actually doing new draft packs that they're going to be composing out of all sorts of different cards, and those are also going to be the packs that are allowed in the Expedition. So instead of just picking particular sets, you get an entire pack of cards that is available in Expeditions, and you just have that pool to play with. So you have a designed Expedition that is a bit more friendly to like the general design of like what it is that people want to play. So the format will change up every month. That should be really exciting. It's going to be wild. Flame of Zolta is looking to be really, really fun. I'm hoping it's a big shot in the arm for Eternal. I think it looks like it's just going to be amazing, and I'm pretty excited to see all of the things that are happening. So, into the spoilers. We have a fresh one for you today. I think we're going to spoil it early on after we talk about some of the other like big options, but we also have a new keyword in Flame of Zolta. They did say that there were 5, and it turns out that the 5th one is in fact a fully formed keyword and not something like emblems or anything like that, which is sort of what I think people were considering, or maybe they thought it was spellcraft, something along those lines. Like, yeah, there was definitely a lot of interesting speculation as to what the 5th keyword was going to be, and it turns out that it is just a new one. It's called Bargain. We're going to be talking about that in just a second. But spoilers first. So, Conspicuous Traveler, 3/4 in Rakano, that says at the end of your turn, your relic weapon gets +1 strength. Summon, you gain 3 armor. Mastery 6, you gain 6 armor. This is really not bad. We found out from Throne Warden exactly how good like this sort of like mild body with a good buff to a relic weapon can be, and this is something that like you can play down pretty early on, get a very big buff to a relic weapon, and then also get additional buffs for armor later on, which allows you for a lot of extra health. Generally, units that heal you are really good, particularly against aggro setups. Like, this is the kind of thing where you play it on 4 and you really don't feel that unhappy about it, even if you're not buffing a relic weapon or your opponent's just going to smash all of that armor anyways, because this is something that's torch proof. It blocks all of the small units. It is not exactly well statted, but it still does enough. And then the fact that it has mastery means that your opponent is loath to attack you, because you then get the health back if they actually get the blocks going. So like, it's just a really hard card to attack into. It's very well statted. I think it's pretty strong in Rakano if you want to go into control with relic weapons, and overall this card should be an annoying one to beat and something that you really have to deal with if you're playing against Rakano relic weapons. I think it's going to be pretty key for the setup, and if Throne Warden is rotating out of the draft packs, I haven't looked at it yet, but if it's rotating out of Expeditions, this is the definite replacement. As it stands, it's also good in tandem with Throne Warden if you want to do wild amounts of interesting things with lots and lots of armor. Wretched Raven is a 1/4. When Wretched Raven attacks, the enemy player discards the top 2 cards of their deck. So it's a little mill card. This card probably will do some interesting things in a draft format. In a ranked format, it's simply too slow. You can't do anything with it. But it is a pretty big flyer. It's got a big butt, so it's a 1-4 for 3, which is definitely quite good for if you want to basically get everything going on and just like sit on the board and block all of the flyers that your opponent is playing in draft. Every time it attacks, it discards cards, which means that you can trigger a number of useful functions with cultists and other types of setups. The main issue with this is that there are also a bunch of madness type effects that people will be running in their decks. Cards that stun, cards that do play out of your deck. So Wretched Raven could feasibly get you some drawbacks as well. As it stands, I'm not sure that I would recommend it strongly in a draft format, but if you've got the right spellcraft weapons to stick on top of this is a great weapon carrier, and the mill effect is actually not bad. There is enough mill in draft that you can actually get some good stuff going on in Flame of Zolta if you want to do mill into just that 45 card list. We've seen Verret, Hero in Training. Oh, that one's not the bit right size. Mastery 6, transform into a Verret of your choice. As everyone has already sort of pointed out, Verret is an anagram for Traver, and so it's very likely that this is a Horus Traver analog in Zolta, which is interesting because the Horus Travers are all sort of from different dimensions, so this is like probably just another Horus Traver, but it's interesting. He is a warrior. We don't know what the Verrets are going to be or what they do yet, so there's not a lot to say about Verret Hero in Training yet, except that for a colorless card, he is pretty reasonable. A 2-3 stat line is quite good. Mastery is something that, like, in general, on a 2-3 makes it very hard to attack into them, and also makes them very good to attack with. This card seems decent, depending on what the transform ability is. It could be very good, or it could be kind of garbage. And I'm guessing that it's going to be a little bit in between, because it's a colorless card, and generally those don't get heavily pushed, even-handed Golem aside. So, interesting, but certainly going to be curious as to whether or not that works out. Misery Walker. This one's really interesting. So 2-3 for 3 in Huru, and has flying and lifesteal when an enemy is cursed. There aren't that many cards that have flying and lifesteal in a Huru type setup, but there are a couple, and like I think the primary one at the moment is a double green that also, whenever it attacks, gets you a bunch of extra health. So this card doesn't measure up against that, or not a bunch of extra health, but it gets a +1/+1 to everything with 2 skills. This card pairs well with that kind of setup, but isn't like going to be better than that Unseen, I would say. Overall, it should be a flying and lifesteal 3-cost 2-3 in most situations, and in a draft, it's going to be an absolute misery to deal with. Like, this card is just really, really rough. It is very, very hard to kill, and like overall, seems like it's going to do some interesting stuff. So yeah, I think this is going to be something that definitely has some impact in the draft landscape. I don't know if it's going to be terribly strong in ranked, but another lifesteal flyer could very feasibly push Huru flyers over a certain edge if you wanted to go with it. We already saw Wretched Raven. Okay, that was it. We have Draconic Ire, but we'll talk about that one after we talk about bargains. So let's go ahead and jump into our exclusive spoiler for the day. We have Noxious Wyvark. All right, Noxious Wyvark is a 3-4 for 7. Flying, summon each unit without flying, gets -3/-3 this turn. It is a Nightmare Dragon, which matters because there are a number of different cards that care about how many differently named dragons you have. And indeed, if you want to play a big pile of dragons and you want to even play like less than 4 of dragons, there may be some decks that can actually support that kind of thing, where you are like running just lots of 2 of dragons and like building a bunch of interesting thing. I think that's like a tier 3 deck, but it's still a really fun idea. So the more Nightmare Dragons there are, the better off it is. But the thing about Noxious Wyvark that's really, really sweet is that it is a flying unit that also sweeps the ground. And it really sweeps the ground. It gets -3/-3 to everything on the board, so that is effectively a hailstorm on a stick for everything that doesn't have flying. This card is very, very good in draft formats. Like, if you play it down in a draft, you are just going to completely wreck your opponent's board. You are probably going to get some good follow-ups because you might attack with a bunch of your own 3/3s and get like those big fancy blocks from the Grodov's Favored or whatever else that your opponent might be doing. You're just going to clear the board with this card, almost guaranteed. It's going to be a very, very important trick to read, and in general, like, this is going to be something where like in draft it just absolutely wrecks. In Ranked, this still probably has a place. It's a reasonable market card because it has that nice Hailstorm attachment and also is a flying carrier of weapons, and muster and all of that stuff allows for weapon-based strategies to be a lot more popular and less well-statted units to generally be a little bit better. I would say that overall this card is probably not going to make an amazing amount of impact in Ranked just because the stat line is kind of on the weak side, but that summon ability is definitely something. And when you compare it with, say, Slime Spitter Slug at 6, it's similarly favorable, but not quite as good. Like, you definitely get just a wild amount of things that you kill. You can completely wipe out aggro strategies. You can do just a really nasty amount of things. And then, like, after that, you get a flyer that's still left over on board that is potentially pretty strong and also benefits from all sorts of dragon synergies, which if you're in Shadow, cultists and dragons are a real thing. Xenon, like, cultist dragon is definitely going to be something that you can work towards. I think this is definitely at least like a one of in any deck that can search for dragons, which there may be a card that allows you to search for a dragon of your choice. And also it's a decent market option if you want to just sweep the board and do some interesting things while also playing dragons to set up for your site. There is a site that cares about how many dragons that you have and gives you card draw for each one of them. So that's another reason to play this card in a ranked environment. But in general, this card is just an insane draft bomb. It's really, really strong. I would definitely first pick this if I saw it, and like for the most part, I think it's just going to be absolutely atrocious against most styles of deck in the limited environment. So really, really solid. Should be a lot of fun to play, and yeah, I'm getting pretty excited for it. Okay. Need a little water there. So that's our spoiler. Let's talk about bargains, shall we? We got some other things going on here. So the one other card that we want to show here from our big spoiler list, because all of the images are different sizes, is Draconic Ire. Speaking of dragons and all of the cards that care about how many dragons you have and what dragons you have. So Draconic Ire is kill an enemy attachment, deal damage equal to its cost to the enemy player, but it has the bargain ability, hit the enemy player with a dragon. So when you hit the enemy player with a dragon, you get to play this card as a bargain. That means that you get to play this card out of your market, if it is in fact in your market, for free. Or, well, not for free, just for the cost of the card. So you get to, if you hit the enemy player with a dragon, you can just play an attachment out of your market like it was in your hand. Doesn't cost you a card, and like you get some like ridiculous nonsense from whatever value that sort of happens. So Draconic Ire is the standard attachment destruction that everyone needs in their market, but you don't need a merchant to access it, because if you can hit your opponent with a dragon, you can immediately kill their attachment and then deal damage equal to its cost to the enemy player, meaning that you can punch a Temporal Distortion deck in the face and then deal 8 damage to their face. Yay, good stuff. It's pretty fun. Almost all of the bargains that I've seen so far are tribal. They involve hitting the enemy player with some form of setup. We're going to talk about each of those in turn, but yeah, this is the first one, and definitely an interesting element of how bargain works, and basically gives you that sort of market card that can also be played as a market. The interesting thing about bargain is that you don't need merchants to play a bargain. If you have a bargain card, you instantly get a 5-card market, so you can just set the bargains into the market, and then like from there you can actually activate them with dragons and other things. You get access to a market as long as you put a bargain into your deck, so you're good on that front. Okay, so let's talk about the other bargains. Arc of Soul. Apparently we have confirmation that all of the bargains have been revealed for this set, so I'm not sure if I'm covering all of them, but we are talking about most of them. Arc of Soul. Sacrifice a unit to play a sigil of your choice from your deck depleted and gain 2 health. Bargain, hit the enemy player with a cultist. This is an example of a bargain that you almost never want to play from the market with merchants. It's something where you get a really decent amount of ramp. All you have to do is have a cultist, and then if you actually get to play it, then you get some pretty sweet benefits from it, because you get the immediate sacrifice ability. This is the fastest secret pages that ever has existed, and also is something that gives you a little bit of extra health as well. So pretty reasonable for overall value, but does require you to get in with a cultist very early and potentially have that cultist be unblockable. Also, you have to sacrifice a unit, which is not always an easy adventure to deal with. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's not a fast spell of any kind, but you can certainly do some wild things with it. Empower strategies with cultists seem really cool. There's a lot of potential for that kind of setup to happen, and you can do some pretty wild things with it. We're going to cover one of every color. Press the advantage. Give one of your units Aegis. Bargain, hit the enemy players with 2 or more Oni. So if you hit the enemy player with 2 or more Oni, then you can give one of your units Aegis for free as a slow spell. I'm not as wild about this one because it consumes an entire slot in your market for an effect that you would probably have in your market, but overall, like, considering the cost of the bargain and the general, like, value of the spell, it's on the weak side. Certainly, if you have a pile of Oni, you can do some interesting things with it, but this card feels a little bit undersold as far as what it can do. Notably, it is something that you would be absolutely willing to take in a draft environment, because this is essentially a free card in draft. Any bargain allows you to just have a card in your market, and then you don't need a merchant, so you are just able to grab this card, play a couple of Oni, and then maybe you'll get an Aegis. Maybe you won't. Either way, it's not going to take up space in your list, so not too bad, not too bad. But hey, next up, we have Inspired Prank. This one's quite fun. Play a 1/1 snowman with +1/+1 for each other spell in your void. Notable because the snowman is not going to die to silence. They actually worded it as such so that even though it is a snowman that has power and toughness equal to each other spell in your void, it just gets a +1/+1 bonus. It's not gonna, I think none of these cards normally die to silence anyways, but it's interesting the change in wording from Svetch's Sanctum where you had like a, you would get like a 0/0 and then that would die. In this case, you will always at least get one unit and get a snowman, but it doesn't count Inspired Prank as a spell, so you have to hit the enemy player with 2 or more Yeti to get this, but it's a decent way to get a little bit of value out of it. I think this card's reasonable for draft, but like overall not too great in the long run. Snowmen don't have any sort of like synergies or tribal setups, and getting a big unit on 4 is okay, but it's not a terrible option, and you can certainly do some things with it if you want to. Okay, next up we have Lothrai Dead Drop, and I think that's the last of them. Draw 2 cards, you take 2 damage for each enemy unit. That's really not that bad. If you're playing against control lists, then you can get some pretty decent benefits from it. This is one of the only draw 2s in Shadow. The other one is Devour, and it's, well, I mean, there's still quite a few options for drawing cards. But overall, this is something where basically if you're playing a lot of cheap elves and you have some way to like sweep your opponent's board or do something along those lines, or you just don't care about taking damage, maybe you have Lothrai Falchion, which would make Lothrai Dead Drop have lifesteal, and thus you wouldn't take any damage at all. There are quite a few different ways to sort of make this work and get some interesting options out of it. I would say that it's not always going to be worth it, and the damage is a very real threat, but this is something that allows you to really sort of pressure and do some interesting things. Keep in mind that there is a 1-drop elf in this set that deals damage to you that is absolutely bonkers, so playing that with Lothrai Dead Drop means that you can potentially get some really wild aggro with some card draw attached, and that's pretty interesting stuff. Life Drinker is the card I'm thinking of, not Lothrai Falchion. But either way, getting lifesteal on this card is pretty interesting, so you can do some neat things. Okay, yeah, so that's all the bargain cards, and I think that's all the spoilers for today. A little bit shorter this time, since we actually did it every couple of days as opposed to like every week or so. But yeah, Flame of Zolta comes out in 3 days. It's going to be absolutely wild. I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to be playing a bunch more of the pre-release event tonight and playing with Draft a little bit. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope it was helpful, and I will see all you YouTube folks next time. Thanks so much for watching.